Oh, yeah. Cheers and salutations. And my phone is buzzing. And let me go ahead and mute it here real quick. My name is Kit. This is Americans Learn. We're still fixing the thing. So that's our other channel, Chicago Reacts. Check it out. But Americans Learn still loves you. But welcome, everybody, to the channel. My name is Kit. And today we return to more spooky, scary stories with bedtime stories. So, folks, please support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do. And especially for this spooky month of October, I expect all you lovely, hip, cool cats to do that. Plus, I'm actually going to a Halloween-themed event later on this month, and I'm actually really excited for it. It's been a long time since I've gone to had some Halloween fun. But we got ourselves a super cool story. It's called The Village That Vanished by Bedtime Stories. So grab yourself a tasty snack and a tasty beverage. I got my Godzilla shirt on for good luck. And let's enjoy this video. Oh, by the way, Godzilla's coming back to theater. Godzilla -1, not sponsored, is coming back to theaters, which is great. So now let's enjoy this movie. Not a movie. This video in a 3, a 2, and an uno.
History is littered with instances in which large groups of people disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In most cases, some form of explanation for what happened has eventually been accepted. But with a precious few, the facts are so inexplicable that no convincing hypothesis has ever been agreed upon. In this story, we examine one such occurrence: the village that vanished.
Aliens. Goose. Ew. Ew. Oh.
The sun had not long risen when Joe LaBelle had packed the last of the equipment into his canoe and then set off downstream. Whilst the previous evening had been cold, this November was actually far milder than many others he had experienced during his years trapping in Canada's Northwest Territories. Instead, rather than the low temperatures, it was the lack of sustenance that now spurred him on the latest leg of his journey. This expedition into the wilderness had thus far produced little in the way of bounty for the seasoned hunter, offering few opportunities to supplement his existing supplies. Thankfully, from previous expeditions, he was aware that there was a friendly Inuit village lying just a little further along the shores of Lake Anjakuni. With luck, they would accept the furs he had managed to acquire in exchange for food and provisions. After an hour of travel, LaBelle finally spied a thin plume of dark grey smoke curling up into the sky from the shoreline. With a wry smile, he adjusted his course accordingly and began to paddle towards the small collection of sheds and huts that came into view. Moments later, his canoe made contact with the frozen shoreline and the trapper made his way into the village. The lack of activity was at first not particularly concerning to LaBelle. It was still relatively early in the day, and it was possible that the bulk of the village's inhabitants were off hunting, away from the settlement. But it quickly became apparent that every single one of the structures was completely empty.
What?
Fires were still burning, and freshly prepared food had been left out ready to cook. But of the villagers themselves, there was no trace. Perplexed, LaBelle resolved to investigate further. On the outskirts, he found the remains of the village's huskies, all of which had seemingly perished due to malnutrition. More worrying still, the graves of the inhabitants' dead relatives had been dug up, leaving icy voids where the buried remains should have been. With an uncomfortable feeling rising in his gut, the trapper began to consider what his next move should be. As the day progressed, he could find no clue as to the fate which had befallen the villagers and no indication that they were due to return. Worse still, precious hours of daylight were burning away. Lebel did not relish the prospect of travelling through the night, and he had no desire to spend an evening in the deserted village, so he began to collect as many items of food as he could carry. With the skies beginning to darken, the hunter hurried back to his canoe and cast off.
That's right. Run, boy, run.
Navigating into the main channel.
Man, no, after a while, like at least an hour in, I'll be like, and even again, hour. Like, hey, listen, I'm not brave. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a hero. Nah. Come across an empty place, like, all right. And being there for an hour is generous. Like, all right, ain't nobody here. I'm going to take these can of beans. Kit, are you eating beans? Yeah, that's right, I'm eating beans. You know, take whatever food I can and just F right off, man. Houdini! Houdini, MFers!
He looked over his shoulder, catching one last glimpse of the abandoned settlement. Bizarrely, it now appeared to be illuminated by a strange bluish glow, which was emanating from somewhere beyond the horizon.
Go away.
With a grunt, Lebel began to paddle faster, determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the unsettling scene, before darkness forced him to once again stop and set up camp. In the first week of January 1931, a small detachment of Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers departed from their barracks in Manitoba and set off on a grueling 560-mile ride across country towards Lake Anjikuni. They were led by Sergeant J. Nelson and had been dispatched in relation to a garbled and confusing telegram which had arrived at their outpost several weeks before. The journey was lengthy and arduous, but passed largely without incident until the Mounties finally neared their destination. Keen to test the validity of the puzzling communication they had received from Joe Lebel, Nelson ordered his men to conduct discreet inquiries with any hunters or local tribesmen they encountered along the way. Their investigations first led them to a local hospital, where an Inuit trapper named Saumek was recovering from the effects of extreme frostbite. He had been found by another group of hunters, alone and unconscious, lying in a snowdrift with his legs so badly frozen that he still had yet to recover any feeling in them.
Oh my God.
The constables questioned him at length, but other than a few feverish comments about an evil spirit known as Tornrark, they could make little.
By the way, yes, I do see the demon in the background, but it's like, you know, why didn't you get that guy to camp?
Sense of his replies. Unable to elicit anything useful from the hunter, the Mounties were then directed to an Inuit village, located roughly 150 miles from their destination. It was alleged that the tribe there had adopted a 10-year-old boy, who had wandered into the settlement one evening in the middle of a snowstorm, which occurred 2 months before. The village elders confirmed this to be the truth, adding that the child had not spoken a word since his arrival, and that none of the surrounding tribes had any idea where he came from. But it was the testimony of a local trapper, Armand Laron, that most troubled Nelson. The hunter explained that for the past few months, he and his 2 sons had witnessed strange and bizarre bluish lights in the night sky, which had followed them. On one occasion, they also caught sight of a large cylindrical object hovering above them, which had transformed into a bullet-like shape, before heading off at speed in the direction of Lake Anjikuni. Eventually, the party reached their destination, finding it largely as it had been described by Joe Lebel. The settlement was small, with the population there believed to have been no greater than 30 people, and was completely deserted when they arrived. Ordering his men to spread out and begin searching the perimeter, Nelson continued alone into the center of the village, taking notes as he did so. As he walked between the empty huts, he took in the remains of unattended meals spoiled and welded to the sides of their cooking pots, the fires below them having long since died away. Inside one of the structures was a child's coat, which seemed to have been discarded halfway through being repaired with a needle and thread. The frozen remains of the huskies were also lying exactly where LaBelle had described, skeletal in appearance due to apparent starvation. Joining his officers at the village's burial site, Nelson found several empty depressions in the ground, each roughly the length and depth of a grave. The ice around these holes was still frozen hard and smooth, with no signs that they had been dug out using a hand or tool. The headstones were stacked neatly in two piles nearby, seemingly refuting any act of nature or animal predation.
Oh, this is beyond creepy. I wouldn't be there too long, man. No, I'm sorry. This is way too creepy. Like, how? Why?
After spending several hours in the village, Nelson ordered his men back to the horses and set off on the long journey back home. Upon his return to Manitoba, he reported that he had found nothing of note at the village. He could not explain how or why the people had left, and neither could he find any indication of criminal activity. One thing that Nelson did note, however, was that LaBelle did not appear to be as seasoned a hunter as he had purported, having only applied for his first trapper's license during the previous year. He had also since sold his story to the Halifax Herald, a local newspaper notorious for its tall stories and inaccurate journalism. With his report filed, Nelson moved on to his regular duties, with no further official investigation into the matter ever taking place.
Why would you investigate into it? Graves dug open, people disappeared, like... Yeah, even the neighbors next door are yelling.
While Sergeant Nelson's report and investigation are as thorough as can be expected, given the resources he had to work with, they contribute nothing in terms of an answer as to the fate of the missing villagers. His findings differ little from the initial account provided by Joe LaBelle, and do not offer any real explanation for the disappearances, save that it was not a criminal act. The fact that fires were still smouldering in the village when LaBelle arrived would indicate that whatever took place did so very recently. There were no obvious signs of a disturbance or that an altercation had taken place. It was as if the people living there had just stopped what they were doing and walked away from the village en masse, leaving their sleds and kayaks behind. But this scenario does not account for why they had left their huskies, or indeed why these animals had not been fed for some time and had not eaten any of the food or supplies which were now lying unattended.
Yeah, that's exactly. Why would you do that to your
dogs? It also does not explain why the bodies of the dead villagers were removed. To interfere with the remains of a departed loved one was the height of disrespect to the Inuit people, and the graves did not appear to have been exhumed by any method known to man. Sergeant Nelson's observation that LaBelle had only recently applied for a trapping license does not necessarily indicate deceit. It is perhaps more likely that he had spent many years operating without one, before finally being forced by the authorities into getting one. His account is also not overly indicative of someone who tells tall tales. It was backed up by the findings of the subsequent police investigation, with no embellishments or exaggerations detected. So what could explain the sudden and unexpected disappearance of 30 people from their homes, leaving very little behind in the way of evidence?
I mean, the only thing would be as if maybe a neighboring tribe and them as well maybe found a new spot and helped them remove the bodies as well. But why would they do it? And
Very
leave their
few
dogs?
rational explanations are to be found. It is possible that the villagers abandoned the safety of their settlement for fear of some looming tragedy, such as a disease or the threat of violence from a neighbouring community. And yet, this seems highly unlikely. It is easy to dismiss the claims of mysterious lights in the sky reported by Armand Laron as simply being the aurora borealis. But this does not explain the mysterious flying craft he and his sons described to the investigating officers.
I mean, you have... Well... Okay, E.T., why are you digging up dead bodies?
As an experienced hunter and trapper, he would have been perfectly aware of the northern lights and whether something different was taking place in the skies above. For many years after the event, rumours swirled that the Mounties had seen mysterious blue lights shadowing them from above during their journey, but that the RCMP had ordered the members of the detachment to remain silent about what they had witnessed. Could the explanation for the disappearance be one of alien abduction, the villagers and their dead beamed out of the village by a passing extraterrestrial craft? And what are we to make of the testimony of the injured Inuit hunter, Saumek? The being he described to the officers was a vengeful spirit from Inuit folklore. This creature was an oversized man with large tusks protruding from the sides of its mouth, who was believed to have the ability to control nature and to create lethal and terrifying snowstorms. For many years, there has been mention of various monsters living undisturbed in the vast and unexplored areas of North America. These include Sasquatches, giant humanoids, and terrifying dinosaur-like creatures residing within waterways such as Lake Anjakuni.
So in other words, Season 3 of The Mandalorian. I know, I didn't want to reference that, but come on. Dinosaurs, aliens, Sasquatch. Come on. Come on. Like, what really did it?
Could whatever creature the Inuit came to know as Tornrak be yet another entity to be added to this growing gallery of strange beings? There are also suggestions that the region may be home to a series of rifts or breaches between dimensions. Over time, a significant number of aircraft and ships have vanished, with some believing that they and their occupants had disappeared through weaknesses that separate our reality from neighbouring ones.
Humans are such easy prey. From Beyond. If you know what movie I'm talking about, I love you.
Throughout the years, the story of the missing Inuit village has been revisited by various authors, and the RCMP have been asked to provide more detail of their investigation into the matter. They maintain that no crime took place, and that the story is at best an exaggeration, and at worst, a deliberately staged fabrication. Examining the various accounts surrounding the event does seem to add some weight to this argument. Since the original newspaper article, which was published in 1930, various embellishments from LaBelle's account appear to have been added by subsequent publications. Sometimes the number of graves that had been disturbed varies. In others, the nature of the structures encountered by LaBelle have been altered, with a suggestion that they were in fact tents, rather than permanent buildings.
Yeah, but why leave the dogs? Why leave the dogs?
If it truly was makeshift accommodation that LaBelle saw at the side of the lake, this would offer a more realistic explanation for the incident. What he stumbled across may have been the remains of a seasonal or temporary camp, with the inhabitants simply moving off onto a new or permanent settlement somewhere else. In search of money for his story, perhaps the trapper did exaggerate the encounter, or stage some of it for the Mounties to find. As with many of the events that we have examined, it is unlikely that the truth will ever come to light. Too much time has now elapsed, and there is no obvious source from which any further evidence may be forthcoming. This mystery, like so many others which have taken place in the Canadian wilderness, will forever remain as such.
No, that can't be it. Unless it is. Sorry, something knocked against my window. But that's it. I feel cheated. I feel cheated. Okay, so what did we learn here? All right, first of all, with a rational mind, let's just say that the hunter was exaggerating things, and the guy only recently became a hunter because his license was 1 year old. All right, so that means this guy, this hunter, whoever, he or whatever he was trying to do, maybe he did come across a temporary camp and exaggerated the dead dogs and the remains, but the thing is that the mounted police were there too. So, I mean, putting two and two together, something isn't adding up. Something doesn't add up. Something ain't right. Okay, so Canadian people, the people who live in the great state of Alaska. And hey, I've actually been to Montana. I was on 2 dinosaur expeditions there. You know, you guys got some spooky, scary stories about lights in the sky and aircraft that don't look like USA aircraft or Canadian aircraft, or stories about that gosh damn Sasquatch. All right, let me ask you a question. What are your stories about UFOs or that gosh darn Sasquatch or strange monsters or demons or ghouls or ghosts, ghouls, and goblins that go bump in the night? Type your stories in the comment section below. Regale us with your stories. I mean, is this true, or is this all just one big old hoax, a joke hoax, a hoax joke, a joke hoax? Type in the comment section below and let us know. All right? Okay. There you go. But bedtime stories. Nothing better than a spooky, scary story to keep me up at night. And I've come across my fair share of abandoned buildings. You know, my family, we've lived in Indiana or had property, at one point. And Indiana, especially Michigan City, Indiana, there's a lot of abandoned buildings, and we know why they're abandoned, because of the economy. And if you travel from Chicago to Indiana, you notice a lot of abandoned towns or steel mills and areas and malls, most notably Market Mall. By the way, if you're from Michigan City, is Market Mall still abandoned, or have they brought it back to life? Tell me. Let me know. Actually, it means something to me, because Market Mall was, Jesus Christ, I'm 39 going on to 40. It meant something to me. But until then, take good care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you guys on the flip side. And what do you think happened to that village? Let us know. Be safe out there. The ghosts, ghouls, and goblins are knocking at the door.